Hi guys. You may have caught me in a very bad time. It's 2024. I don't think it has long left. Yes, 2024. Much like every year before it, it is finally on its way out, reminding us that one day we're next. And much like every single other year that came before 2024, a lot of things have happened, both good and ungood. We finally learned this year that Mr. Beast wasn't entirely a nice. Moldy cheese ran abundant throughout the entirety of the United States, and a lot of people ended up liking children. But if you're a teensy little channel much like myself, you'll realize that 2024 had a shit ton of games released in its entirety. Games that remind you that this is still a hobby worth getting into, and other games making us realize that we might end up needing this video one day. Much like the little goblin that I am, I've played a lot of video games this year. Some might consider too much. I decided, much like last year, I decided to compile a bunch of the video games that I made this year into a big final end of year video to cap off 2024. But much like last year, I've also wrangled a bunch of my creator buddies to also come onto the show and also share some of their thoughts. So give them a subscription down below and go follow them on all their other social medias. Now also, let me lay down some ground rules for everybody here real quick. When I make these videos, anything goes. As long as you played a game in 2024, it's eligible for this list. Doesn't matter if you played the biggest indie hit, the biggest AAA hit, or if you played Tennis for Two for the first time in 2024, it goes.
But before we officially start, because as you've seen, I played and beat a shit ton of games this year. So allow me to bring up some honorable mentions before this video officially starts. Nine Souls, Stalker 2, Dead Rising 3, Dead Rising 4, Gun, Cold Winter, Darkwatch, AVP 1, AVP 2, Unreal Tournament, Unreal Tournament 2004, Develated, Elisa, Kid 64, Half-Life 1, Make Boost, Sprawl, Sin, Killing Floor 1, Killing Floor 2, Black Mesa, Jet Set Radio, Bum Rush Cyberpunk, Brutal Legend, Crackdown 1, Crackdown 2, Crackdown 3, Rare Replay, Palworld, Ni no Kuni 1, Metal Slug Tactics, Ashen, A Plague Tale Requiem, Camp Sunshine, Nikodoriku, Call of Juarez the Cartel, Dying Light 2, Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess, Devil May Cry 4, Stray Blade, Crime Boss Rockay City, State of Decay, The Callisto Protocol, Mad Max, Have a Nice Death, Atlas Fallen, Rage 2, Ninja Gaiden 1, 2, and 3, Atomic Heart, Sea of Solitude, Recore, Battletoads, Neon White, Rise of Rome, SteamWorld Dig, Persona 3, Reload Fist, Monster Hunter Rise, Tunic, Remnant 1 and 2, Like a Dragon Ishin, The Man Who Sold the World, Cassette Beast, Metro Exodus, and Immortals of Avium. And listen, there's a shit ton more games that I've played this year that won't feature on here, period. So for the sake of keeping my viewer attention at an all-time high, I think it's time that we finally start this bitch up right. So ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce to you 2024's best and worst games. Starting off with what I would like to call my first biggest hot take of the year, and in a post-Live Leak world, I think I need to desensitize some of you softies because look how nice this looks. Dead Island 2 was always one of those games I wanted to play but just never got around to it. And what a shame because I absolutely adore the first Dead Island. We don't need to talk about Riptide. And it wasn't until March this year when the game got added to Game Pass where I was finally able to sink my teeth into it, like the cannibalistic corpses you're gonna be bashing the skulls back into. And let me tell you, damn it dude, this game was an absolutely fun time, which baffled me because a lot of creators and even friends of mine told me how either bad or mid this game was. And well, yes, there are some criticisms that I do in fact agree with, like the story being shit, the main character's personalities making me wish that we could inflict the same exact amount of viscera onto them like we do with the zombies, and some of the missions do the unfortunate thing of reminding me what kind of a world we live in today, like seeing a YouTuber apology getting written up, commit a massacre on top of a rooftop while this TikToker is using us for clout. I wasn't expecting a reality check from a Dead Island game, but I guess here we are. And the main problem with this game is if you aren't sucked into the gameplay loop of exploring these beautiful locations while risking a YouTube age restriction, then I don't think this game would be for you. But for me, man, this is the most sucked into and engaged I've been in an open world zombie game in ages. So much so that I beat this game on the Xbox One, played a shit ton of it on my Series S, and I am busy replaying it and plan to beat it again on my PS4. I love this game that much. So yeah, this game gets a definite recommendation from me. I'll be giving it an 8.7 out of 10. Oh, and yes, this video is going to contain a ranking system out of 10. Isn't that so 2006 YouTuber of me? Now, Now, during the course of 2024, one of my favorite hobbies I've been indulging myself into is going online and trying to locate some abandonware games. Because hey, these files are just floating around the net, so it would be a massive shame if I didn't make use of them some way, right? And one of the first franchises I decided to make victim to my lack of conforming to greedy corporations that no longer wants us to buy the games they worked so hard on was the Transformers games. Mainly the entry starting all the way back from 2011 all the way to 2015. Yes, as I'm sure you know, like many of the games that were under Activision during this time, these little puppies were lost to the sands of time after having their licensing expired, which also means that certain Marvel games that were under Activision, like let's say Spider-Man, is also up for the taking, meaning that you get to play through this gem yourself right here.
Help! Please! Someone! I'm going to die!
And what better place to start with what I used to consider one of the best Transformers games, and you'll see why I used to in just a little bit, Transformers War for Cybertron. Transformers attempt on cashing into the third-person shooter craze created by Gears of War an entire 5 years too late. But damn it, man, this is still one of the greatest Transformers games ever made in my opinion. Everything from the game's aesthetic, to the shooting, to the different characters you're able to take control of on both the Autobot and Decepticon sides, giving you so much gameplay variety as well as the personalities of each of the Autobots or Decepticons you'll be controlling. It was just perfect, and there's a 1,000,000% of recommendation from me if you want to get into some Transformers gaming. Next up was Fall of Cybertron, which I felt was a step forward and back in a few certain ways from War for Cybertron, mainly because it felt like the pure third-person shooter gameplay was toned back a bit, and in place of that, there was a much larger emphasis on giving the game a more cinematic flair and spectacle. But overall, the game was still amazing, and was a definite high point for Transformers in the video game space. I mean, unfortunately, I wasn't able to try out the multiplayer, but from what I'm aware of, the multiplayer on both of these games actually kicked tremendous amounts of ass. Finally, in this trilogy of third-person shooter Transformers games was Rise of the Darkspark, the one game that spelled the end to this monumental achievement for this legendary franchise, because this game is just boring as shit. I'll try my hardest to sit through this game for a future video at some point, but fuck man, this was not the send-off that the shooter series deserved. But thankfully, my sour mood was saved by what I now consider to be the best Transformers game of all time, and that is Transformers Devastation. Dude, the smile I had constantly on my face while I was playing this, from the cel-shaded Gen 1 inspired designs, to the awesome hack and slash and third-person shooter combat, to the music, to the stage exploration, this game was a damn thrill right through and through, and it never let up. And what better company that had brought us this kick-ass expensive than motherfucking Platinum Games, best known nowadays for classics like Babylon's Fall. But all jokes aside, this one game took me all the way back to 2013 when me and my brother experienced Metal Gear Rising for the first time. So let me tell you this right now, if there's a game from this list of Transformers game classics that you need to play, then please let it be this one. The only issues with these kinds of games, as well as abandonware games as a whole, you're just gonna have to try and figure out how to play these games yourself, because if I was to just outright give you the website where you can get these files, then the next place I'll have to end up filming my next video in is during my next court hearing. But it's okay, at the end of the day, you're all adults who play video games and have unlimited access to furry hentai thanks to the internet, so I'm sure you guys can figure something out. So in terms of rankings, Transformers War for Cybertron gets a 9.4 out of 10, Fall of Cybertron gets a 9.2 out of 10, Rise of the Darkspark so far gets a 4 out of 10, and Devastation gets an easy 9.5 out of 10.
I like trains.
How's it going, everyone? I'm the Suited Bird, and recently I've been doing a lot of live streaming over there on that there Twitch website, and one game that really surprised me that I'd like to talk about here is a game called Void Train. The best way for me to describe it is, remember that game Raft that has you and your friends in the middle of the ocean collecting materials to build up your little raft and survive? Yeah, it's that, only you're on a space train that is also partially a first-person looter shooter. So Void Train, you start on a little trolley and build up the trolley to a massive train by collecting materials both from space and also at different train station chests or off the dead bodies of guards defending it. Now, this game is still in early access, but has just released a new major update at the end of October that added a lot of content to the game and its story. Now, I will say the gunplay has a lot to be desired, but I describe it as good enough. Another problem is some repetitiveness, because it can take a while to progress through the story, and sometimes you feel like you're not really progressing when you actually are. Also, the price tag is a little steep at $30 United States dollars. It is, though, everything I wanted out of Raft, but actually done well. It's pretty, well made, and even though not complete, has a ton of content to play through. If you liked Raft or the concept of Raft and have a few friends to play with, I'd recommend this game, especially if it goes on sale. I'd rate this a low A tier game personally, with a lot of potential for it to get even better.
Americans!
In my never-ending search for games to scratch that retro itch I feel from time to time, which may or may not mean that I probably have to seek medical attention, I set my sights on a game that I've always played the shit out of when I was a kid, but only now have I properly taken the time to sit down and see it through to the end. And that game is Criterion's Black. Let me just tell you now, I feel that this game is something that was mandated by law to be owned, because I remember wherever I went as a kid, no matter who the person was, if they had a PlayStation 2, this was a game that they had no questions asked. I don't know why, it's just something I've noticed for literally over 16 years. But hey, all those people who did end up owning the game owned without a doubt one of the best first-person shooters to be released in the final years of the PlayStation 2 and original Xbox, because this game is just pure quality through and through, and it pretty much did everything that we know modern card games are well known for nowadays an entire year before Call of Duty 4, because this game has it all. Great feeling and sounding guns, check. Large Hollywood set pieces with the best looking particle effects that you'd ever find on these aging systems, check. A large variety of these great sounding and feeling weapons, fucking check. There's a reason that this game was advertised as gun porn. And let me tell you, I think all in all that this game is a lot safer way to experience the overall bliss of emptying an uncharacteristically large magazine into hordes of enemies, because I think sticking your dick into a gun barrel sounds like it could be a very painful experience if you forget to turn the safety off. But there's a reason that this game has become a classic in the PS2 and Xbox console space, and I'll be happy to tell you that it still holds up amazingly an entire 18 years later. This game gets a solid 9 out of 10.
I'm Pickle Rick!
Much like Dead Island 2, this game might end up without a doubt being one of my many hot takes, so gatekeepers, get those comments ready, because I really liked High on Life. Not loved, not adored, but just simply liked. I think the hate towards this game was a little bit overblown, and the whole Justin Roiland controversy in 2023 didn't really help its case either. But when it comes to just being a damn fun first-person shooter, I think for the most part that High on Life truly succeeds at just being that. But unlike a bunch of other games that hover around the just being fun category, at the very least this game does have a shit ton of personality embedded in it around every single corner. And I'm not just talking about the wide variety of different environments that each all have their own unique look and feel to them. I don't mean the various amounts of different character species you'll end up encountering, all ranging from humans to these alien beings to these oh so adorable little teddy bears. No, I'm talking about gold like this.
All right, Buck, you're gonna have to use the brand new double jump to get over there. Oh shit, I'm sorry, Buck. I forgot there's no double jump, just crouch. We gotta try crouching, Buck. Fucking scheduling and scoping bullshit. A fucking crouch prioritized over a double jump.
All right, here's the product. A genuine talking knife. I gotta be honest with you, he's a real piece of shit.
He's extremely violent. He basically only talks about wanting to kill people in very disturbing ways.
Fuck you, I'm gonna carve out your anal cavity. Gonna make it 3 times as big. Your shit's just gonna drop right out of it.
I'm the goop guy around these parts. You wanna sneak into G3 facilities? You gotta get covered in goop. That's just how it goes. My stuff's quality, so you want some goop, right?
You know what? Yes. How about a big fat yes? Let's go.
Perfect. Head down the alley there and just let the magic happen, I guess. Don't worry. First goop's on me. Just tell all your buddies about it. I'm the goop guy. I do goop stuff.
Here's what's up. My name's Stan, and I sell vials of alien cum. I know that's probably not what you wanted to hear when you walked over here. You wanted cum or what?
Wait, hold the phone. What the fuck? You sell alien cum?
I know it's gross, but calm down. My name is Stan, and I sell horrendous amounts of all sorts of alien cum, and we're just gonna have to live with that knowledge together now.
Well, look what we got here. Fresh meat. Hey there, fresh meat. Welcome to the slums, fresh meat.
Oh boy, here we go. Fucking kid.
What's wrong, fresh meat? You scared of a little kid? Yeah, I'm a little kid. Look at me. Look at me. You're scared of me? Oh, I'm scary. Not. Well, maybe I am. Look at me. I'm scary.
No, we just want to get past.
Come on, let's see what you got, fresh meat. If you can't handle me, how are you gonna deal with 9 Torgs goons?
Don't let him get to you.
Look at fresh meat getting flustered by a little kid.
Whoa. It's just a kid. Don't shoot him. I am not shooting a kid.
You shot me. I'm dead.
All right, there. Are you happy now? Well, I didn't think we'd be allowed to kill him. Normally, killing children in games isn't allowed, but he's dead. We killed this kid. Are you happy now?
Yes, if there's one thing about this game that I'm pretty sure everybody will remember, is that this is a Justin Roiland game through and through, meaning that the humor in this game is more catered towards 50-year-old Redditors that have nothing better to do in their lives than to rack up that oh-so-sweet karma. And well, yeah, there was some jokes that turned me into the giggler. A lot of the jokes just made me cringe, and yeah, it's like I mentioned, this is just edgy Reddit humor, the video game. But if you're able to look past all of this, luck be with you on that, you'll have yourself a pretty fun game, all things considered. And that was probably my biggest shock with this game, aside from the alien cum, is that it was just a damn fun first-person shooter. It felt just like a budget version of something like Doom Eternal, which is way more praise to this game than I ever thought I was going to be able to give it. So, hey, I'm going to be honest here. If you're looking for a shooter to just blow away 5 to 6 hours, then there's certainly a whole lot worse you can do. And as a bonus, if you are indeed a fan of this brand and comedy made famous by Roiland, please go outside for your own sake, then I really think that there is no harm in giving this game a go. I give it a 7.7 out of 10.
Scotland forever!
Moving past the overly excessive swearing and cum jokes to a game that was a definite pleasant surprise amongst all the games I've played this year, and that's a little indie horror title known as Still Wakes the Deep, the most Scottish game I think I've ever played.
Alright, kids.
I'm alright. What are you doing up there?
Pipe's leaking. If it's not one thing, it's the other. See this whole rig? It's a pile of shite. It's falling apart. And we've only just started drilling. Fucking Akidave. And fucking Rennick cutting corners.
Aye.
Speaking of, you are in the shite, wee man. Rennick got a letter this morning from the mainland and he's been up to high dough ever since. Heard he's gunning for you.
That's just brilliant.
Christ, I need a smoke. Can't find my lighter anywhere.
Take mine. I don't need it anymore. Honestly.
You're a fucking lifesaver.
I'm going to get breakfast.
Alright. I'll see you for darts tonight.
Now, whereas Still Wakes the Deep isn't going to be winning any awards in its overall gameplay because this is just a simple linear trek from point A to point B, it gets a fuck ton of points from me because of its story, setting, and atmosphere. I mean, come on, how many games do you know that takes place on an oil rig? A place that's just stuck and isolated in the middle of the ocean, super far away from any civilization. Not many to my knowledge, but damn it, this game just takes that setting and creates one of the most atmospheric locations I think I've ever experienced in not just a horror game, but gaming in general. And I really hope that other games explore the possibilities of giving us way more unique places like this in the future. And in my opinion, the game's strongest element is without a doubt its story. This plot of these people trying to get off this rig taken over by this otherworldly infection was so captivating, and the performances from the characters in this game is without a doubt the best I think I've heard in an indie game in a long time. There's just so much emotion on display here, and it just adds that huge layer of authenticity to everything that's going on in the game. And as I've mentioned in my Why Horror Games Are an Addiction video, I think that this game has one of the best kinds of enemies, because instead of these characters just being turned into these mindless drones that only exist to scare you once and just turn into annoyance later down the line, they're turned into these fleshy masses akin to John Carpenter's The Thing, that all in all just look absolutely disgusting. and I'm pretty convinced somebody on the internet might find these hot. But what makes them even more terrifying and tragic at the same time is that they still retain the personalities of the people they infected, making you always question whether or not there was some sort of way you could save them or not. And the character that you play as is probably one of the most deeply layered protagonists I think I've ever controlled in an indie horror game, because it doesn't only exclusively follow him trying to survive the situation gone to shit, but the interpersonal struggle and growth he goes through in the game is what really makes this plot something special. If you truly love narrative-focused horror games, I definitely think that this is one that you would be doing yourself a disservice to by skipping it. This game gets an 8.5 out of 10.
The Adam West Mobile.
Hello there, I am Mr. Long. Now, I'm pretty sure you may know that already, but what you guys didn't realize is that I'm a part of a small breed of YouTubers simply known as morons. And the game I'm covering in this section is definitely both proof that I am a proud member of this group, but that my spending habits need to be closely monitored because I'm clearly not doing myself any favors. Now, when it comes to 13, I've played quite a bunch of the original game on Steam, and I want to properly give it a go on the PS2 because this game is quite unique and is something I say stands a test of time thanks to its comic book aesthetic. And clearly a few more people must have thought the same thing, because of all the games to get a remake, this probably wouldn't be the first game that comes to mind. And maybe that's for good reason, because the remake we ended up getting out of this is probably one of the worst remakes I think I've ever played. Everything about this game is just so bland, repetitive, and boring. And what really could be seen as annoying is that this game feels like it lost all the charm that made the original game so special to begin with. Now, I will admit, once again, there's definitely worse games out there that I've played than this. Need I remind you that we live in a post-Redfall world? But still, taking a pretty beloved shooter from back in 2003 and just turning it into a cel-shaded Call of Duty knockoff with absolutely nothing interesting aside from the few nods that remind you that this game was inspired from a comic book, this is definitely not a game that's worth your time. Just play the original instead. It might have definitely aged in a few departments, but at the very least you can still appreciate it for what it was when it released. 13's remake gets a 4.5 out of 10. Much like my trek last year to beat all the Doom and Quake games, I decided that it was time to give Halo the same treatment. And since this is the year I finally got my Xbox One and Series S, I was finally able to play the one game in this franchise I've been hearing nothing but horror stories about, but was sadly locked on that console. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. The first game on this list is Halo 3 ODST, a teensy little spin-off that released 2 years after Halo 3, and what can be considered the very first Helldivers before that series would make the rounds in 2014. Because here we take control of a rookie ODST exploring the ruined city of New Mombasa after the events of Halo 2. And for what this game is, how the hell haven't we gotten a Halo game that adapts this kind of formula? ODST's biggest strength, in my opinion, comes from its slower pace and larger emphasis on stuff like exploration and atmosphere. Because while you're exploring this city at night, you're alone, you're isolated, you're like a Discord mod trying to go outside for the first time. And at certain points, ODST feels a hell of a lot more like a horror game because of this approach. Also helping the fact that you're not playing as a Spartan. No, you're just a normal human, dropped into this unforgiving environment trying to locate the missing members of your squad. And the missions where you take control of said missing squad members just transport you back to the glory days of Halo on the Xbox 360. It's just so damn fun and nostalgic. And I really am glad that the Master Chief Collection has this game included so more people can experience it. But now after that, we now move on to the one game that rattles the core of every Halo fan whenever its name is brought up. Here we have Halo 5 Guardians, the game that I was fully embracing myself to despise, but no. I liked it. Remember, I'm a guy that likes Halo 4, and just by me saying that, I may have just put myself on someone's shit list, but to that I just have to say, cope. Now, I will say that as a Halo game, I definitely think that Halo 5 is definitely the worst game in the entire franchise, but if you were to treat it as its own entity, I still think it's a pretty competent shooter. It just feels a tad bit undercooked when you compare it to other shooters that came out in 2015. I still think that this game's visuals holds up amazingly, the gunplay I felt was an improvement over Halo 4, and everything just still felt like Halo to me. And this game really brought me back into the franchise and wanted me to replay the older games. But all of the new stuff that they tried to add, like the squad-based gameplay and some Spartan abilities, just felt a little bit underutilized and downright pointless at the end of the day. And you also gotta keep in mind, all of this is coming from me who just ended up playing the campaign, because when it comes down to the multiplayer component of 5, I sadly wasn't able to try that out yet. And that upsets me because to my knowledge, I heard that 5 probably has one of the best multiplayers in the franchise. But now that I have a hell of a lot better internet than the first time I played this, maybe now I should try it out again and see if I can't actually have a match going. But that'll probably be a thing I'll take a look at next year. And as for our last game in this section, thank goodness, I was so happy to be wrong, because now we've got the myth, the legend, Halo Infinite to cover. Primarily the campaign, because let me tell you something, Halo Infinite's multiplayer was enough to give me hype, but for the campaign, thank goodness. I'm super happy to say that 343 Industries actually cooked with this one. Because let me tell you, a fun fact about a person that started playing Halo back in 2013 with the anniversary remaster of the first game, Halo Infinite's campaign was what I actually thought Halo was to begin with. Whereas we all know, Halo is a strictly story-driven, linear yet open ROM from stage to stage that encourages player expression and exploration in a lot of instances, like the best examples of this design being the second stage in the first game, Halo, or stages like the Silent Cartographer. Halo Infinite feels a lot more in line with what I thought Halo actually was. A large open-world game that emphasizes exploration, great gunplay, getting upgrades to make gameplay a hell of a lot more fun. No shit, when I played Halo all the way back then, that's what I was thinking to myself the series was about. And the fact that Halo Infinite was everything I thought the Halo series was to begin with, it funnily enough seemed to come full circle for me. But regardless, I really loved Halo Infinite's campaign. Everything from the exploration of this new Halo ring, the various ways to explore it, utilizing either the abundance of different vehicles or the best integration to the entire series with Chief's grappling hook, the latter of which being one of the best new additions to add even more expression not just in exploration but in combat. The gunplay was awesome despite the fact that it had a hell of a lot less weapons than the previous games in the series, but I think I can forgive it more in the campaign because it almost feels like more of a quality over quantity sort of thing. And the different missions you can do in the open world, each giving you a different reward, is just everything I love in an open world FPS. It feels like I was transported back in time to when I first took a dive into this franchise, as well as taking me back to my first time playing something like Far Cry 3 before the series was so over-bloated, and when this entire new formula for first-person open world games was still fresh and new. And if I'm being completely honest here, if you treat Halo Infinite's campaign in a vacuum, without the mid-multiplayer, I think that this game would have probably been even more widely beloved by the overall Halo community. And it really makes me even more excited to see what the new Unreal Engine 5 Halo 343's got cooking can bring to the franchise. So the rankings go as followed. Halo 3 ODST gets a 9 out of 10, Halo 5 Guardians gets a 8 out of 10, and as for the campaign section of Halo Infinite, it also gets a 9 out of 10.
I'm just split!
So the more I go down this list of games, I'm starting to realize that my gamer privileges should probably start getting revoked, seeing as this was my first time ever I properly sat down to beat every single entry into the TimeSplitters franchise. I have played a lot of TimeSplitters 2 on the PS2, and I really fucking liked it, but it wasn't until after I got my Xbox One that I finally decided to finish the second and third game, and it wasn't until after I beat those games that I decided to go back and actually play the original on the PS2. So what do I think of this entire franchise? Well, you may be surprised to hear this. No, I'm not. I don't think your expectations are very high of me anyway. But I personally think that TimeSplitters 1 is the best game in the entire series, which I found quite interesting. And the reason behind me thinking that is because mainly, I just love the pure simplicity of this engine. You just get dropped into a map, find the MacGuffin, haul ass back to the beacon to exit the stage, no cutscenes, no plot, no nothing. And with the gameplay style that is probably still one of the easiest to get into, I just think that this helps with the game's overall pacing. Now moving onwards to TimeSplitters 2, where I will 100% admit that this is an improvement over the first game in almost every single conceivable way. This time around, the game's pacing sometimes gets destroyed by you needing to complete certain tasks in each mission in order for you to finish the game. But aside from that one single gripe that isn't really that big of an issue to begin with, the rest of the game was just equally as good as the first game. I just wish the game was just a tad more focused on going from point A to point B be like its predecessor. And finally, Time Splitters Future Perfect. Now, this is the one game in the franchise where I personally think that the gameplay is the most refined it's ever been in terms of the overall shooting. But I need to admit, it kinda loses the charm that the last two games had just in terms of its pure gameplay, where instead of it being an evolution of the formula set in stone by GoldenEye 007, subtle foreshadowing by the way, it's more in line with modern shooters that we got around the time like Halo. Not to say that's bad whatsoever, not at all, because with the approach that this game takes with its story being more in line with traditional first-person shooters we have now, I think the shift to this more modern style really works to the game's benefits. But aside from the shooting, I think that this game also probably has some of the best set pieces in the entire franchise. The mansion level was a complete standout for me because of completely biased reasons I am aware. The weapons are probably the most fun to use in the entire series, and all in all, the game just feels like a natural progression that the Time Splitters franchise needed. And it makes it even more sad that we never ended up getting a follow-up to this game. But like I mentioned, I feel that aside from the humor and style, it kinda loses some of the old janky charm that the previous two games had when first-person shooters on consoles were still rather new. But regardless of all of that, this is still a franchise that I 100% recommend you give a go. And to further sway your decision, I will continue with the rankings. Time Splitters 1 gets a 9 out of 10, Time Splitters 2 gets a 9 out of 10, and Time Splitters Future Perfect gets a 9 out of 10. Wow, we got a franchise that all scored the exact same. Seems like copying off the smart kids' homework does seem to have benefits after all. It is only fate that if we talked about the Time Splitters series, essentially the spiritual successor to both this and Perfect Dark, then of course I wouldn't be 100% satisfied with myself if I didn't take a look at the game that started off the trend of putting first-person shooters on systems that couldn't annoy Metallica by downloading their songs off of Napster. Now, I have to admit one thing though. I did play the rare replay edition of GoldenEye on the Xbox One, because I don't exactly own the system where its controller looks like you can control marine life in a 10-mile radius. So I'm not getting the quote-unquote proper experience, but if that means I get to have higher resolutions and play the game with a controller that won't be possibly featured in a cartel execution video, then so be it. And besides, I feel that this is probably the most definitive way for you to experience this classic because damn it, I've heard a shit ton of different things like how this game has aged, and upon beating it, I really have to say, what the hell were they smoking? Because I had a great time top to bottom playing this classic. I loved everything from the gunplay, the different environments that were adapted from the film. I for one personally love the dated visuals, all being upscaled to fit a higher resolution, because looking at this man's face over here never ceases to bring me to the state of giggling. And all in all, I think this game has aged way more gracefully than most people would have you believe. It really does make me quite eager to actually go out and get an N64 just to see how this game actually fared back in 1997. I will admit though, this game still does have that problem of you needing to complete a set amount of missions in each stage before you're even capable of moving onwards. This stage on screen in particular must have taken me probably like 40 minutes because I have the navigational skills of a drunken sailor who thinks he's able to will the ship where he wants to go from the crow's nest. But aside from that one singular gripe, which, truth be told, is 100% me just coping and seething, everything else about the game was just awesome, and I can definitely see why this game set the standard back at the time for first-person shooters on console. So with all that, this game gets a solid 9.3 out of 10.
Do not deny me my doobie!
Now listen, I am aware that I must have just given you the most erect nostalgia boner you've ever experienced, and I'm here to say, you're welcome. But man, isn't it justified? I miss it back in the days when studios would pump a shit ton of cash into a project like this. Now, I'm aware that a bunch of you who, heaven forbid, actually go outside might actually have no idea what this game is, so allow me to enlighten you. Mix the story of Dante's Alighieri Divine Comedy with God of War, and you are probably one of the most underrated hack-and-slash games that came out during the 7th generation. Now, obviously being a far cry from the actual God of War games we had around the time, but throughout the endless sea of God of War and Devil May Cry clones we got during this time, this game is without a doubt the best adaptation we got using this formula. And I mean, I don't even really need to describe the gameplay whatsoever. The footage on screen really just speaks for itself. And on top of that, I do want to make a full-length video on this game at some point, and how I feel how it's just a crime we never ended up getting a sequel to this, or any other game that was able to capture the OG God of War feel this well. My only real complaint with this game is just the final boss. Not because I think personally it's badly designed, underwhelming or anything. Nope. Someone thought it was a good idea to animate Satan's dick and balls waving all over the place, and I do commend someone for actually actually taking the time out of the day to do this, but damn it, dude, it's not exactly the nicest thing to look at while you're busy fighting him. But that's not enough to stop this game from getting a 9.2 out of 10, and depending on who you are, that might actually be the selling point. Now, I'm pretty sure you may be starting to think to yourself that I must have a ghost player or something like that playing my games for me if I hadn't ever beaten any of the Crash games yet. And to that I will say, that's actually not too bad of an idea. But no, much like any other franchise that is as long-running as Crash Bandicoot, I have played an ass-ton of them, but never really just sat down to finish them. In this entry's case, when I was still a youngin', I did actually beat Crash 3 on the PlayStation 1, and I did beat other Crash games later down the line like Crash of the Titans and Mind Over Mutant, games that I think are grossly overhated, but when it comes to the mainline Crash games, I haven't really ever sat down to beat any other one of them aside from Crash 3. That all changed when I decided to grace myself with the Insane Trilogy and Crash 4 on the PS4, where I now finally decided enough was enough, time to actually see what I've been missing out on all this time. Starting with Crash 1, well, no doubt a classic and is one of the grandfathers of 3D platformers. This game is fucking hard. There is so many instances in this game where I just audibly wanted to yell out bullshit so many times and actually threw streaming fits because of the game's difficulty, which I have no idea if they've always been so strict on the platforming or if this was an Insane Trilogy exclusive problem, but man, there were just so many times where I just wanted to give up on this game altogether and just move on to something that would save my sanity. But aside from the frustration that I felt playing this game, it still was a good time. I personally don't feel like I want to throw away my credibility of being a YouTuber 100% just yet by saying that this game sucks, because really, it doesn't. It's just something that you're gonna have to sit down and be 100% locked in like you're a cod sweat. Moving on to Crash 2, it is definitely a Mount Everest level improvement above the first game in every single way, because of a much larger variety of levels, gameplay style, improved controls with added movesets, and then some. Now, a lot of people say that this game is the best out of the entire PS1 trilogy. Now, where I don't personally agree with that statement myself, I will say that because of them refining everything problematic from the first game and just toning down on the difficulty and the bullshit, they created without a doubt the definition of a proper sequel. But no, ladies and gentlemen, my heart will forever go out to Crash 3 as the best game in the PS1 trilogy, because much like Crash 2 to Crash 1, Crash 3 took everything that Crash 2 did and just built another Mount Everest above that Mount Everest, because this game has it all. The best controls, the best levels, the best soundtrack, even more toys and abilities for Crash to play around with. And hey, it's even the first time where we get to control Crash's sister Coco, where she even gets her own set of toys and gameplay styles for her levels. This was and still is my favorite Crash game in the entire trilogy for all the reasons I mentioned there, whether it be OG PS1 or the Insane Trilogy. But I wouldn't say that it's my favorite Crash game anymore. That honor goes to Crash Bandicoot 4, It's Dick Time. It would seem to me that the idea of every single Crash game in the mainline series was to just take what the last game did and make it better. Simple as. And yes, I'm very well aware that this isn't the original Crash 4. That honor belongs to Wrath of Cortex, where I'm assuming that Starfield got its inspiration for the overabundance of loading screens. But when it comes to the true sequel to Crash 3, everything this game does just does everything leaps and bounds better than its predecessors. Beautiful and varied environments, check. The ability to not just play as Crash and Coco, but sections dedicated to Evangelion Fantana, Dingo Dial, and Cortex. An actual story. Probably the best platforming and abilities this series has ever seen. It even managed to blend Crash 1's more difficult platforming in this entry and not making me want to take a Wumpa Bazooka to the skull. It's clear from the moment that you start up this game to the moment you finish it that Vicarious Visions created the most definitive Crash Bandicoot experience ever made. And it just pisses me off to the most severe extreme that it seems that we're not going to be getting a sequel to it anytime soon after the cancelled game's images got leaked. Activision? Fuck you. Oh, and just to also address the elephant in the room, I did in fact not 100% all of these games because Cat Icarus exists, and I just use him as my motivation to never put myself through these levels of agony. Or who knows, maybe I'll try it on a stream if we reach a sub goal or something. But until then, let's value my life for a change. So for the rankings, it goes as followed. Crash 1 gets a 7 out of 10, Crash 2 gets an 8.8 out of 10, Crash 3 gets a 9.3 out of 10, and Crash 4 gets a 9.4 out of 10. Jumping ship over from one of my favorite series of all time to one that I've gotten pretty heavily invested with thanks to the original game that came out back in 2000, we now get to talk about the prequel to that game that released as a launch title to the Xbox 360, Perfect Dark Zero. And let me tell you something, when it comes to me as a player of video games, I really try my hardest to find anything likable about any game that I play, even the ones I'm not the most proud of. But Perfect Dark Zero, while not being a bad game, it's just so bland and mediocre I was practically falling asleep every second I was busy playing it. While the overall gunplay I thought was fine, integrations and stuff like a cover system, dodging, and other stuff that could have been seen as innovative for shooters just felt forced in and unpolished. And while it does have variety in its environments, weapons that somewhat still contains the essence of what made the original Perfect Dark so special 5 years prior, this game is just a snooze fest that has a few glimpses of fun. And I found it even funnier when you take the original game that is severely outdated by comparison, but yet that game still stands leaps and bounds above everything when it comes to pure originality and its structure and gameplay. The only real way I can recommend you playing Perfect Dark Zero for yourself is if you're a YouTuber like me who gets to talk about obscure games to a large audience online. But other than that, I don't realistically think that you should actually go out of your way to try this game out. But if you do want to give it a go, at the very least you are able to play it via the rare replay collection on Xbox One. But let's be completely honest here, you'll probably be playing the OG Perfect Dark on that collection instead. This game gets a 5 out of 10. Now when it comes to the genres that I go to normally, beat-em-ups aren't usually at the top of my list. Hell, before I ended up playing this game, the only real beat-em-up I absolutely adored was Shredder's Revenge, and most of that enjoyment just came from me playing with my brother. But man, nothing was ever going to prepare me for the day that I browsed my Epic Games library, saw that I actually claimed this game a while ago, said to hell with it, let's try it. And then I ended up playing what is without a doubt my favorite beat-em-up game of all time. Everything from this game's combat to the art style to the music, of which they even got Johnny Gioli from Crush 40 to do some vocal tracks. And man, being a Sonic fan myself, feel sorry for me. Hearing this guy's voice in a game that isn't Photo Affinity's biggest cash cow was so refreshing. But once again, everything in this game, from the combat, the character designs, the music, everything just grabs you and refuses to let you go until you see the credits. And man, I was just hooked from start to finish. This was probably one of the few instances where I wanted a game like this to just keep going so I could just keep on playing it. But hey, it's a short 2-hour game with 4 playable characters, and as a tradition with these types of games, there is 4-player co-op, so this game definitely checks off the box for replayability. And I need to also commend this game for bucking a trend. And what trend is that, you might ask? We all know it's been a trend for human characters to want to transform in their personas. Well, in Jitsu Squad, we get to see that from a furry's point of view. Had this game taken off in the mainstream, we might have actually ended up seeing a shit ton of furries wondering what their humsonas would look like. Jitsu Squad gets a 9.5 out of 10.
Birmingham is a fucking shithole!
Now believe me, this was one of the biggest shocks I've ever had in my entire life playing video games. But when the credits rolled on Bloodborne, I felt what it was like again to be a sweaty virgin. How I yearned for this day. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I've done it. I've actually beaten Bloodborne, the game that proves that Sony is allergic to money. And let me tell you, when it comes to the vast library of Souls games under From Software's catalog, I can definitely see why this game receives so much praise, because everything that you might have heard about this game is true. The beautiful gothic Victorian London inspired world of Yharnam is just a joy to explore, just to see how much attention to detail and secrets were hidden away in this world. The weapon system is probably the best that you can get in any Souls-like, practically being a 2-for-1 deal, each having their own specific strengths and weaknesses. The enemies are also unique in their designs and attack patterns, making you never truly be able to know what you're in for the second that you encounter of them. And much like any other Souls games, the bosses are just pure spectacle, and I will hear nothing less about that. Whether you're busy talking about the intro boss, Cleric Beast, Ludwig the Accursed, Vicar Amelia, or the Moon Presence, you are in for a hell of a time when you eventually get to fight them. And yeah, this game is hard, no doubt about it, but it's something that you've come to expect with Souls games, right? So with all of that out of the way, Bloodborne gets an easy 9.5 out of 10.
Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is the long-awaited return of the Budokai Tenkaichi series, which is beloved by every Dragon Ball fan, including myself. In Sparking Zero, you can battle both offline and online with 182 plus characters, all the way from the original Dragon Ball series even up to Daima. You can even customize your characters, giving them many different outfits from different sagas in the Dragon Ball universe, which is one of my favorite features because I love being able to change the outfits of my characters. You can play through episode battle mode with many different what-if storylines, which I cannot spoil for this segment. You can play custom battles created by the community or even create your own, and then my personal favorite mode, the World Tournament mode, where you can battle with people in a tournament-like bracket and try not to get run out. Overall, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is the best Dragon Ball game and a perfect return to the Tenkaichi series. It gets an 11 out of 10 from me. But fuck the Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta players.
Keeping up with the Souls-like trends, Flintlock is on this list purely because of how much I enjoyed it, yet the public reception for this game sometimes leans too far into the mixed category. And I think sometimes I've seen that this game was considered one of the worst games to be released this year. And that just never made any sense to me. Yeah, when you compare it to many other Souls-likes we've seen throughout the years, like The Surge, Lords of the Fallen, the new one, Code Vein, Lies of P, or even the developer's previous game, Ashen, Flintlock doesn't really come anywhere close to those games in terms of its depth and challenge, but this game never really promoted itself as being the next big Souls-like. It was always going to be a Souls-like, something a lot easier for people who aren't too accustomed to From Software's established formula and difficulty to jump into to see whether or not this is a type of game for them. And in my opinion, everything from the game's visual style to the combat to the different skills you're able to acquire and the overall RPG mechanics, I just can't and will never be able to understand the negativity towards this game. I personally had a great time with it. I will just say, however, that if you're like me, who has a job, a family, and other things that takes priorities above playing video games, if you end up dropping the game's difficulty down to the easiest, I can definitely easily see this game taking 4 to 5 hours to beat, because then you can just blow through everything this game has to offer with no problem. But aside from that, what is there that this game did wrong that caused so many people to just dislike it? Maybe it's the plot, because we all know I play video games for those. Maybe it's some behind-the-scenes drama that I'm not too aware of. If you guys know why, just please let me know in the comments down below. But for my own personal ranking, this game gets an 8 out of 10. Now, much like last year as I went through all the Call of Duty campaigns from Modern Warfare 2019 all the way to Modern Warfare 2022, it would seem that I still had some ground to cover even when that video came out. And thanks to Xbox adding Modern Warfare 3 and Black Ops 6 to Game Pass, I was finally able to catch up on everything Call of Duty. So that pretty much means I played every single game that was released from 2019 all the way to now. So with all of that out of the way, let's start with Modern Warfare 3. If you want to talk about a plain and simple rush job that just reuses assets, great ideas that just never really seem to truly come together because of simply not having enough time to cook, and a plot that falls flat on its face with stupid decisions and a continuity that will only ever make sense to anybody if you care about the lore in Warzone, yeah, just like how Kingdom Hearts fans enjoy their lore. And speaking of Warzone, that is essentially what this game's campaign feels like. It's just Warzone with bots. And what irritates me the most, much like Call of Duty Vanguard in 2021, it's upsetting to me because the gameplay mechanics are still as solid as they've ever been. And the idea of a more open world approach to the Call of Duty formula actually works surprisingly well. But once again, because of this game's crunch development time, it never really got enough time to play around with that concept at all. And this is just without a doubt one of the weakest campaigns I think I've ever played in any Call of Duty game, only inching slightly above Vanguard. But thankfully, I guess the multiplayer was fun enough. There were zombies in this too, right? But I will say though, the next game on this list is one of those instances where I was absolutely happy to say I was wrong. Wow, taking accountability for my actions. This isn't gonna be very common for YouTubers now, is it? And that is Call of Duty Black Ops 6. This is probably the best Call of Duty game we've ever gotten gotten since Modern Warfare 2019. The campaign, I'm gonna be honest with you here, is just peak. While yes, it does still contain the same shooty missions that Call of Duty always had, it breaks that up with a healthy amount of mission variety, whether you're sneaking around the gala, taking pictures of Bill Clinton, and even able to do side quests within that mission, revisiting the open world idea from Modern Warfare 3, only this time feeling more inspired by games like Metal Gear Solid 5 instead of Warzone being such a vastly large improvement. To my favorite mission, just allowing me to go apeshit on zombies with a grappling hook and enemies from the zombies mode with 115 playing in the background. It was so damn good, and with the more trippy psychological approach that this campaign took, it really makes me wonder what the next Black Ops game will do to keep up the momentum set by this game. And thankfully, Zombies I would say lived up to the hype. It's super fun to play this whether you're going at it alone or doing it the definitive way with a bunch of buddies, but sadly, the multiplayer is probably the weakest part of this whole package, and I'm sorry to say everybody, the Omni movement isn't worth it. But thankfully, Zombies and Campaigns kicks more than enough ass for me to tell you why I think that this is probably one of the best modern Call of Duty games we've ever got. So as for the rankings, Modern Warfare 3 gets a 4.5 out of 10, and Black Ops 6 I'll happily give an 8.5 out of 10.
Get ready to die, asshole!
From time to time, I think it's a really healthy habit to just go onto your consoles or PC and just pick out a random game that you've never heard of before or always was curious about, but just never really gave a shot. That was my mindset going into Sunset Overdrive, one of Insomniac Games' weirdest titles. And I'm not just talking about the game's premise and gameplay, no, not at all. It's just that this game was one of the only games they ever developed exclusively for Xbox, whereas we primarily knew them as being a PlayStation exclusive developer way before they even were acquired by PlayStation. But thankfully, them just switching sides this one time doesn't mean that their quality went the way of the dinosaurs. No, sir. Sunset Overdrive I would consider is probably one of the biggest hidden gems on not just the Xbox One, but Insomniac's catalog. Because this game's got it all. A massive city to explore in this game's unique way, like needing to grind on rails, using everyday objects to keep the momentum going, ensuring that your movement never lets up. Great gunplay with a shit ton of different weapons that all have their own unique attributes, which we all know Insomniacs are the master of at this point. I think it's safe to say that even when Insomniac isn't giving photo affinity content to work with on games like Ratchet & Clank, or making video games that are the only reason to still have faith in Marvel, that if you give them creative freedom to create something completely fresh and original, brothers can fucking cook. So Sunset Overdrive gets a 9 out of 10.
The Akidave and its sequel, Platform 8, asks players to face their biggest fear, the subway.
I'm a little drunk and I can go right now.
At their core, they're a horror version of those spot the difference games, and while you think that get old fast, the game has a constant Rolodex of encounters, dubbed anomalies, and the very design of the games spooks the player without having to do a thing. On top of enemy encounters, the game itself pulls out tricks that try to make the game end earlier. I won't exactly say what the game does because I'm a bit on a timer here, and I'd rather you experience that for yourself. But think Eternal Darkness and you'll have an idea. The Akidave takes place between floors, so when you encounter anomalies, you only have the option to run back to move forward. But in Platform 8, you don't have that luxury to move between train cars. You either have to move forward or find a way to make it through without being caught or fall into their traps. I think I yapped for a little longer than a minute, but I love these games, and they get an S rank, in my opinion.
In a year where we got to celebrate without a doubt one of the most iconic horror franchises, racing games not included, fans of FNAF were finally graced with one of the best games this franchise has to offer, and all of that brought to us by a company that has a cat as its mascot that sounds like he stepped on an auto-tune machine. Now, where FNAF Into the Pit isn't the scariest thing on the planet, choosing to forego the point-and-click style of game for a more traditional free-roam system akin to games like Resident Evil, FNAF Into the Pit deserves major props for bringing this franchise back to pure survival horror, because when it comes to the FNAF game, I would argue that this is probably one of the best games we could have ever gotten in this franchise, and aside from something like FNAF Security Breach, I would say that this is without a doubt one of the most innovative games in the entire series, with an actual world, stories with characters to follow, proper puzzles to solve, unique mechanics we haven't seen yet with this franchise, and just so much more. I really have to commend the devs for adapting this fan favorite book into, without without a doubt one of the best FNAF games you could have ever gotten. And what better time to have released it than on the Bear's 10th anniversary. I've already made a full video covering this game, so if you want to have a look at what I did to celebrate the Bear's 10th anniversary, then I'll leave a link in the description for you all. But FNAF Into a Pit gets an 8.5 out of 10.
Flarpo?
Now, as I'm pretty sure we all know, mascot horror isn't really the most beloved genre in recent years, unless you frequent the Lanky Box YouTube channel because you hate your eardrums and find solace in key jangling. But My Friendly Neighborhood, this is a game I've heard nothing but praise for when it came out, and upon playing and beating it myself, I can definitely say without a doubt the praise was justified. And in some ways, it almost feels like this is the real proper first-person Resident Evil game we never got, even more so than Resident Evil 7 and 8, because this game rolls with the formula set by the PS1 entries into the franchise and just adapts them into a more modern style with its own unique quirks, like having the entirety of the game take place in a children's show studio lot, and having the enemies being these Muppet knockoffs. And hell, even one of them is voiced by Arlo. Isn't that just a sweetie pie move? Now, this game isn't the scariest thing you'll ever play in your entire life, much like the PS1 Ori games before it. Yeah, I said it, these games are not scary. It takes everything from the puzzles, limited resources, and limited saves to create one of the most unique adaptations of the survival horror formula, and everything works to the game's benefit because of it. So this game once again gets a 100% recommendation from me. My Friendly Neighborhood gets a 9.3 out of 10.
Hey, you. Finally awake.
Skyrim is an RPG game with somewhat interesting storylines, some enjoyable characters, thoughtful dilemmas, and the single largest modding community in gaming. The open world nature of this game, giving you agency, makes it quite enjoyable. 10 out of 10. Wait a minute, did you think I'm a pushover? First of all, this game is made by Bethesda, a studio that seems more interested in getting off on their own sequels rather than doing any bug fixing. You thought Cyberpunk was bad? Well, try getting past the intro sequence of Skyrim, you fucking wingding. If you're lucky enough to avoid bugs, you have to protect your fragile sense of immersion from that kid in Riverwood who's a brat, despite you saving the world no less than 2 times.
You're new around here, so I'll go easy on you. But don't get on my bad side.
Hell, the most interesting dilemma in this game is choosing between the Empire and a faction of racists. If that doesn't bother you, then have fun with the open world that's diminished by fast travel because you're a lazy piece of shit. You could try fixing all of this with mods, but the modding community walks around with sticks up their asses. Getting a straight answer out of them is like trying to convince a British person to eat coffee. Minus points, 7 out of 10.
So if you wanted to hear what my most disappointing game of 2024 was, well then, here you go. Hellblade 2 was something I was actually quite excited about upon hearing it getting revealed, and then that actually finally got me to play the original game. And let me tell you, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice also sits comfortably as one of my favorite games of all time. But upon finishing it and crying my eyes out, it made me realize, no, fuck! This game doesn't need a sequel! So my excitement for the sequel quickly turned into dread as I had a gut feeling that everything was going to be undone that was established in the original. And son of a bitch, I was right! Everything that Senua went through in the original game was just undone here. This was a massive character assassination for her, and now we were just back to square one, which was massively frustrating. And all the emotional beats that this game tried to hit with me didn't leave nearly as much of an impact on me like the first game. It only ever really worked once, and that wasn't even for Senua's character, that was for another character in the game. But I feel that the plot itself didn't really focus too much on moments like these. And when it comes to the overall gameplay, this is definitely where I think that the game still stands out the best, because it just replicates the formula of the first game, only now giving us way more fights like this. And the puzzles and environments and the visuals for this game are 11 out of 10. It's just an absolute marvel, and it will go down as one of the best looking games of all time. But the main driving force being the plot and seeing the inner struggles that Senua goes through, it's just not there like it was in the original. As a game, I still think that this is worth experiencing, but as a sequel to one of my favorite games of all time, it's without a doubt the most disappointed I've ever been, not just in 2024, but in gaming in general. Hellblade 2 sadly gets a 7 out of 10. Thankfully, moving over from my most disappointing game of all time to one of the greatest games I've ever played in my entire life. And hell, they still managed to capture all of that greatness from the base game in a free DLC. But let me tell you this right now, God of War Ragnarok Valhalla isn't just a DLC. This is the definitive conclusion to the entire God of War series as a whole and Kratos' character. Now, I don't need to go into too much detail about God of War Ragnarok. That was my game of the year in 2022, and like a bunch of other games I've mentioned in this video, it's one of the best games I've ever played in my entire life. But with the addition of the roguelike free DLC, I feel that the series can finally come to a definite conclusion. Everything that happens in this game is just a pure love letter to longtime fans. So much so that I don't really want to spoil too many of the game's biggest moments, because if you've played these games all the way from the beginning on the PS2, these moments will leave such an impact on you that'll never be able to be replicated by me just explaining them to you in a YouTube video. Now, when it comes to the gameplay, it's all still the same excellent combat that we've come to know and love from both 2018 and Ragnarok, basically being the closest thing that we could get to a God of War Souls-like experience. And the roguelike aspect that was added in this DLC leaves so much room open for replayability, it's insane. But as a package itself, I feel that after Valhalla, the God of War franchise should just come to an end. Maybe make another game focusing solely on Atreus, but as a longtime fan of the series that saw it stagnate back in 2013 with Ascension, please just bring Kratos' story to a close. Both him and Santa Monica deserve it. God of War Ragnarok Valhalla gets a 9.5 out of 10.
Hi there, and welcome to Indigo Park!
Now, much like My Friendly Neighborhood, I tried out another one of the breakout mascot horror hits of 2024, Indigo Park, made by the one guy who stomped everything the Euphoric Brothers were able to do in a week. Now, whereas everything in terms of its gameplay is still the exact same walking simulator shit we've seen so much to the point where I'm convinced Kojima would start begging for stuff to speed up, I will say that this is one of the few instances where a mascot horror was made as a passion project instead of just some interactive marketing ploy just so that you're able to sell an assload of merch and NFTs to children. Everything aside from the gameplay, like the sheer personality and mystery that's in this park gone to shit, really captivated me, and I wanted to explore every single inch, if only to hear what this furry bait prick would have to comment on. And I just personally thought that it was just a really good time, and it was a game that was made with love and not profit in mind. Now, I haven't really been keeping up with Unique Geese and all his other endeavors, but I am really curious to see what him and his team are able to cook up for the following chapters in the series. But for now, Indigo Park Chapter 1 gets a 7.5 out of 10. And hey, it's free, so you're not really exactly losing anything by trying it out.
What a load of bullshit.
Special thanks to the devs for the review code for this one. Now, this might come as a surprise to you, but I am a tremendous Ratchet & Clank fan. I played nearly every single entry into this franchise, aside from this furry gun fetish's latest entry, where the internet truly proved how quickly some Twitter artists are able to work as soon as a new character just steps foot on screen for 4 seconds. But I can imagine for anybody who's a longtime fan of this franchise, much like myself, from time to time, we would just love to see what other games are able to take from this third-person shooter platformer hybrid and take their own spin on what Insomniac was able to make all the way back in 2002. And while yes, there were quite a few games that attempted to cash in on Ratchet & Clank's success, the ones I've seen and actually played in the past being quite shit, it would seem that it wasn't until 2024 where the same developers behind another indie hit, Pumpkin Jack, was able to take the formula and create a game that I would argue is almost on the exact same level of quality as what Insomniac was able to give us. Enter Akimbot, a game that I'm pretty sure just by you taking a look at the footage on screen, you can pretty much see where its inspiration lies. And let me tell you, if you've been aching for a PS2 level third-person action platformer akin to the Ratchet & Clank franchise, then Akimbot is going to scratch that itch for you no problem. It's got it all. Varied and pretty environments, different weapons, varying gameplay styles that allows you to tackle the enemies on foot, race against them, or take to space in these Star Fox-esque aerial battles. And on top of that, this game still retains the same amount of quality in terms of the voice acting as well as the story. Now, this game does sadly suffer in a few places, primarily when it comes to the performance in some areas, though this could be a Series S exclusive problem that the devs really should iron out, as well as them not completely committing to the Ratchet & Clank formula enough, making the game feel a tad bit barren in the weapon department, when you consider that you're only going to be stuck using the base unlocked weapons that the game gives you, whereas the really cool gimmick weapons can only have you carrying one at a time. Seriously? Who the hell thought that would be a good idea? But aside from those tiny little nitpicks, everything about this game, I guarantee you, will transport you back to the good old days where you were hunkered down under your blanket on a Friday night, possibly destroying your eyesight because you sat so close to the television that you could practically see every RGB pixel changing color to make the image on screen, and just blasting your way through a shit ton of enemies, except now this time you have a robot to simp over and draw fan art for. So a Kimbot gets an 8.8 out of 10.
You what?
Now if you're anything like me, then you make it a very unhealthy habit of trying to find clones of a certain genre that you fell in love with. And if this video is anything to go off of, yes, whenever something looks even vaguely like it adapts the Souls formula, whether it be just a straight copy or it adds its own tiny little spin onto it, you can bet your ass I'll be chowing on that homeward bone and heading over to whatever storefront sells it just to give it a go. And thankfully the game in this entry was one I was tremendously excited for, and man did it ever live up to the hype. Another crab's treasure is 2024's indie darling that decided that people probably wouldn't like feeling depressed going through George R.R. Martin's wet dream, and instead wanted to have a Souls-like if SpongeBob was the game's director. Except even that's kinda weird to say, because this game tackles some pretty heavy themes like microplastics and pollution within the ocean. So if this is meant to be an accurate representation of how marine life gets to live their lives thanks to us humans' constant destruction of their ecosystem, then damn it man, who are we to deprive them from such fun? I'll get the car battery. But all jokes aside, if you want a colorful, light-hearted Souls-like mixed with a 3D platformer that still packs a signature Souls-like difficulty, with a genuinely funny premise of you essentially saying to hell with getting evicted, I want my home back, along with some of the most creative level design bosses this side of the indie Souls-like scene, then man, you're doing yourself a disservice to not experience this gem. Another crab's treasure gets a 9 out of 10. Now you see, a little bit of a freakishly long backstory. I have a friend called Scrakes, and my boy also has a YouTube channel, but you see, he primarily covers horror games. So imagine to my surprise when I open up our Discord DMs and him actually recommending that I play Katamari Damacy. And once We Love Katamari Reroll was added to Game Pass, who was I to deny one of my beloveds the privilege of seeing me play essentially what I imagine the everyday Japanese person sees when they blink too fast. And well, yes, this game isn't beating those allegations. It's just one of those Zen games that just pulls you in. The gameplay was super addictive, the story was stupid in the best possible ways, because I'm pretty sure that the devs themselves knew as much about what they were writing as I was while I was playing, and this loop of just making a bigger and bigger Katamari just sucked you in, and the game's visuals and soundtrack were just so amazing too. I've always known about the Katamari games for as long as I could remember, but this was the first one I actually properly sat down and played from start to finish. So that may possibly also open the floodgates of me trying out the other games in this franchise. But until then, We Love Katamari Reroll plus Royal Riviere gets a 9.3 out of 10. Much like my Souls-like phase, when the spooky season rolled around, I was just hammering at horror games both new and old. So much so that I ended up making a sequel to my Souls-like addiction video, only this time substituting it with the survival horror genre. Well, as we've talked about games on this list like Still Wakes the Deep, which I just absolutely loved, I've come to realize that I fell deeply in love with the old school style of survival horror made famous by Resident Evil all the way back in 1996. And the best game that took all of those elements and crafted one of the best survival horror games I've played not just in 2024, but of all time, that honor has to go hands down to Crow Country. In this game where you're exploring the titular Crow Country, you need to find the owner of the place in order to tell him something, setting up the goal and the mystery of the entire plot. And from that point forward, have fun, mistreat the park goers in any way you wish. Everything from this game's art style, tense as shit combat, smartly designed puzzles, horrifying enemy designs, and abundance of secrets that you can uncover, truly making this one of the most content-rich indie horror games I think I've ever played. And if you need any further proof to how much I love this game, I must have played and beaten this game around like 7 times. 100%ed the game both with the unlockables that you can find in-game, as well as getting every single achievement over the course of like 3 or 4 days. And you can bet your ass or any appendage that you are willing to lose in a game of chance that if I ever play this game on any other platforms like Steam or PlayStation, then it's gonna get the exact same treatment. Crow Country without a doubt gets a 9.4 out of 10. Thank you so much again to the developers for the review code. Just as a little bit of an editor's note, I actually didn't add Little Gator Game to my original list. I must have been washed. But regardless, much like I had in time last year, Little Gator Game was just what I needed when stuff was getting a little bit too stressful in my life. And I needed something to help me unwind in a way that didn't include me taking part in an activity that would guarantee me getting the electric chair 10 times over. If you're looking for one of the coziest, sweetest, and most stress-free little time waster games of all time, you play Little Gator Game. Because it essentially just takes the exploration and gameplay from something like Breath of the Wild and just couples that with this feeling of childlike imagination, almost like South Park The Stick of Truth in a certain way, except with less Nazi babies and testicle dodging. This is another one of those games that I completed top to bottom, and I'm 100% planning on doing so again and again until it's been beaten on every single platform. So if you're having a bad time and you need an adorable little alligator to cheer you up and not maul you to death, then I can't recommend Little Gator Game enough. This game gets a 9.5 out of 10.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Now, as a Resident Evil fan, it may come as a shock to you that I haven't touched the DLCs of 2 of my favorite entries in this franchise years after they released, and 2024 was finally the year where I decided to give both of them a proper go, and I really liked them. Starting off with Shadow of Rose, I really loved the more psychological horror elements that they added to the Resident Evil franchise, and it genuinely made me wonder what a more Silent Hill-focused Resident Evil game would look like in the future. Whilst I still didn't think that this game was scary at all, more so funny really, because I was streaming it for the majority of the time and shit like this kept happening. Oh, do they now? Is this the trinity of predators? Dr. Disrespect, Ava Chris Tyson, EDP445. You see, you're even mod here, so why would you not want to be on YouTube? Oh, for fuck's sake, she's gonna catch my ass. Oh, she's stupid, that's fine. Okay, she is literally, quite literally a dummy. Okay, everybody, I want you guys to do me a favor. Can somebody clip this part of the stream here? No, wait! I wanted to do a funny! I thought that as a standalone entry, it was really damn good. And I think that this was the perfect send-off to the Winter storyline if they never choose to follow up with these characters. This is also once again one of those cases where I genuinely couldn't understand the lukewarm reception this game got when it came out. Because I'm really sorry, man. I thought that this DLC was great. But now we move onwards to the creme de la creme, as some would call, of an amazing DLC, and that was RE4's remake's take on Separate Ways. And whilst I did think that this was amazing, and I absolutely adored every single second that I was playing it, I couldn't also really help feeling a tad bit let down at the same time. Now, that might come as a surprise to everybody watching this, but I think the major reason why I think that this game didn't necessarily strike every single chord with me as it should have was primarily thanks to God of War Valhalla. Yes, these 2 DLCs came out the exact same year, except one of which was free and the other one was around $15, where one of them was the perfect conclusion to its entire franchise and the other one was just playing through the exact same plot through somebody else's perspective. Yeah, I don't know. God of War Ragnarok Valhalla might have just been the biggest reason why I didn't quite gel with Resident Evil 4's DLC so much. But even if we were to treat this game in a vacuum away from God of War Ragnarok Valhalla, I just didn't personally enjoy it as much as the near masterpiece of the base game. But if we vacuum seal this motherfucker even more, taking away the base game, you can definitely see that this is still a quality product through and through. From the overall gameplay additions that brings the Arkham games into Resident Evil, to still retaining every single element that you fell in love with, like the puzzles and stuff, and still just having the core gameplay from the base game pretty much untouched and just added upon, this was still an amazing DLC. It's just these little tiny external factors that might have just had an impact on my opinion of this DLC. But as for the rankings, Shadow of Rose gets an 8.5 out of 10 and Separate Ways gets a 9 out of 10. We're almost done with this list, and what better way to end the main meat of this video with the game that pisses me off because of how shit the game is and disappoints me tenfold because of the developers behind it. Yes, Back 4 Blood is essentially the Left 4 Dead 3 we never got, and if this is what the sequel to one of the greatest zombie games of all time would have been, then I think we should be happy that Valve can't count that high. This is one of those games where yet again it pisses me off because there is a good game in here, and it is truly fun, but it just lacks the soul of what made games like Left 4 Dead so special to begin with. Because whereas Left 4 Dead was just a simple to get into first-person point A to point B romp with a bunch of buddies, Back 4 Blood truly feels like it just had corporate higher-ups all over the game's development, because it just feels like any other cash grab Left 4 Dead clone on the market. But that's where the problem comes in, because this game was made by the original devs, and that really makes me feel so bad for Turtle Rock Studios. Firstly, they had what could have been seen as the Concord for 2015 with Evolve, and now this game. Damn it, dude, just let these poor people catch a break from time to time, you know? I have read, thankfully, that it seems that there is a sequel to Back 4 Blood in development, so I really hope that with that sequel, they are able to capture what made Left 4 Dead 1 and 2 so special all the way when they came out. But as things currently stand now with Back 4 Blood, this game sadly gets a 4 out of 10. But let me tell you something, I've kind of been keeping one single game on this list a secret, because whilst all of these games were obviously placed in no particular order, when it comes to every single game I've played this year, none of them came even close to what ended up taking my top spot of the list. And the best way to cap off this entire video, I think the best way to introduce my game of 2024 is with one single cutscene alone. Let me tell you, I've never seen a game capture this feeling of finality more than this one scene alone. And yeah, if you couldn't tell, Elden Ring takes the cake of being my 2024 Game of the Year. And fuck, man, I genuinely can't imagine that anything else would have even come close to probably what is From Software's greatest game. I don't think I need to go into too much detail, because if you've seen anything about this game, or if you've played it yourself, I think that me telling you why I almost think that this game is one of the closest things to a 10 out of 10 experience would just be a waste of both our time. But since we're at the end of this video list anyway, allow me to just gush a little bit longer. This gigantic open world that demands to be explored, filled with all sorts of secrets, different kinds of dangers, and contains guaranteed rewards for those who seek them out. I don't think there's a game that is quite like Elden Ring. When it comes to the combat and RPG elements, I think that this might be one of the most robust catalog that From Software's ever had, and the fucking difficulty and feeling of satisfaction when you overcome enemies, bosses, and so forth is indescribable. Oh, and the bosses, once again, I'd argue are the greatest in any Souls game, whether it be Margot the Fell Omen at the beginning of the game, Starscourge Radon, where you even get to team up with this game's furry bait character Blight, or even the two final bosses, Radagon of the Golden Order and the Elden Beast. I'm not even going to lie here, this truly brought a tear to my eye, because everything in this game was building up to these two final moments. Also helping the fact that Elden Ring was my very first From Software developed Souls game I ever beat, and sent me down this rabbit hole which eventually would lead me into making my Souls-like addiction video. Elden Ring is what a video game should be, not just modern video games, just in general. So much content, no microtransactions, fun and fair challenges, and so much more. Everything about what video games should be is perfectly encapsulated within Elden Ring, and that's why this game sits at my top of 2024. Elden Ring gets a 9.8 out of 10.
And yes, with all of that, that brings us to the conclusion of the best and worst games from 2025. Once again, I want to give a special thanks to every single guest that stopped by. Be sure to check their channels down in the description below. Hopefully as well in this video we were able to recommend you something new that you haven't tried out yet, or recommend you against something that you should absolutely just stay away from. Special thanks to all the channel members, as well to top tier channel member Panda in Space. Without you guys, I would not be able to create the kind of content that I would love to and that you guys love watching, so thank you all so much. And to everybody who sat through this entire movie length video, thank you guys all so much. So I've been John from the channel with the freakishly long name, and I will see you all in 2025. Happy New Year and a Merry Christmas to everybody. Goodbye!